Somewhere tonight, in a house that is finally quiet, an alarm is being set for an hour before dawn. And the person setting it has no idea that they are about to enter the one practice that has stood behind almost every life God has ever used. There is an hour with God. The saints of old kept it. Whole generations of believers were built by it. And then somewhere along the way, this generation lost it, traded it for fragments, for 4 minutes in the car, and a verse on a screen and a whispered prayer at the end of a day that had already taken everything. Today we have more Bibles, more teaching, more access to the Word of God than any generation in history, and less depth in our walk with Him than almost any generation before us. And here is what should stop you tonight: the thinness you feel in your own faith, the sense that your prayers rise and nothing returns, that you know a great deal about God and experience almost nothing of Him. That thinness is the exact shape of a missing hour, a space where something deep was meant to be built and never was. Stop and consider your own life honestly for a moment. When was the last time you spent one uninterrupted hour alone with God? Door shut, phone in another room, nothing else happening, nobody else in the room. For most of us, the honest answer is, not this year, not for years, or never once. We have lost the hour. Tonight I want to help you recover it. What the hour is, why this generation cannot hold it, what it costs to keep it, and how you can begin to keep it before this week is out. Based on the teachings of E.M. Bounds, a man who rose at 4 a.m. for the last 17 years of his life to keep an appointment nobody on earth knew about. We made this video, and we believe it can be an instrument God uses to speak to you tonight. Because the hour is not gone, what has been lost can be recovered, and it can be recovered this week by you. Now, before we go one step further, I want to do something. I believe there is a remnant watching tonight, scattered across the earth but one in hunger, and I want us to find each other. So wherever you are in this moment, stop and tell us, where would your hour be? Not where it should be, but where it could actually be in the life you really have. A kitchen table before the house wakes, a car in a parking lot on a lunch break, a chair in a spare room after everyone has gone to bed. Type it in the comments, along with your city and your country, so that across every time zone and every language this scattered remnant can see that it is not alone. And as you do, leave a like on this video. It tells the algorithm that this generation still wants to know God and not merely to know about Him. Type where your hour would be, pause for 10 seconds, and ask the Lord one thing: God, meet me there. And now a direct and honest word from us, the ones who make these messages, because here is where it becomes real. The hour is where everything in this message is either recovered or lost. And the hour is precisely what this generation cannot hold. Here is the honest truth almost no one will tell you. The reason you have never kept it is not that you love God too little. It is that no one ever showed you what to do inside it. You feel the hunger, you set the alarm, you get up in the dark, and then you kneel down and there is nothing. The mind wanders. The list assembles itself. The minutes crawl. You run out of words in 11 minutes and sit there in the silence feeling like a fraud, and within a few days you have quietly stopped, convinced the fault is in you. It is not. You were simply never handed a map for that room. So we drew one. It is called the War Room Manual, 30 days that take you into the hour and tell you what to do in it, what to read and how slowly, what to pray when your own words are gone, how to hold the silence when nothing seems to be happening, and why nothing happening is not failure. Every day gives you one page and one thing to do, so that you never kneel down again, not knowing where to begin. It will never replace your Bible. The Word is the foundation, the final authority, always. The manual is simply the map that leads you into the hour and keeps you there until the hour begins to do its work. If you are tired of a faith built out of fragments, and you want to learn to keep the hour, it is linked in the description and pinned to the top of the comments. Now let the noise fall silent, and let us turn to a message on the hour with God that nobody keeps.
Let us think tonight about the hour with God, not as an ideal to admire, not as a discipline for a special class of Christian, but as the ordinary and forgotten foundation on which nearly every life God has ever used was quietly built. For I am persuaded that the loss of this hour is the great tragedy underneath all our other weakness, that we have constructed an entire Christian life that can be lived, and lived busily and sincerely, without one deep hour ever being spent alone with God. Let me begin with the distinction we have lost, for the whole matter hangs upon it. There is prayer that is offered in the moments, and there is prayer that is offered in the hour, and we have quietly assumed they are the same thing in different amounts. They are not. The prayer of the moments is real prayer, and God hears it. The cry in the car, the sentence whispered in the hospital corridor, the word breathed out over a sleeping child, these are not to be despised, and heaven receives them. But there is another kind of praying the Scripture everywhere assumes, and it is this that we have lost. The appointed, unhurried, defended hour in which a man is not asking God for something on his way to somewhere else, but has come to stay, where nothing is being fitted in, nothing is being rushed, and the soul is given long enough to actually arrive. And the loss is this, that we have kept the moments and lost the hour, and then we have wondered why our lives are wide and shallow, why we know so much and are so little changed, why a faith built entirely of fragments has never gone down deep enough to hold in a storm. Now hear me, for this is the heart of it. Almost nobody keeps this hour, and it is vital that you understand why. It is not that God has made it difficult, not that he requires an advanced spirituality before he will meet with a soul, not that he is reluctant to give an hour to anyone who comes. The hour is lost because it costs precisely the things a modern life is least willing to surrender, and because nobody has ever told this generation what to do inside it. A man rises early with real hunger, kneels down, meets 10 minutes of mental traffic he was not warned about, concludes he is not spiritual, and does not try again for 2 years. The hour was never withheld from him. He simply walked into it blind and left before anything could happen, and the failure convinced him of something about himself that was never true. And so I must press upon you the question this whole message exists to ask. If God gave you an hour tomorrow morning, would you know what to do with it? Could you fill 60 minutes alone with God, without a screen, without a plan handed to you, without company? Or would the silence become unbearable in 12 minutes, and the mind scatter, and the whole thing collapse into a vague guilt and a resolution to try again another time? For the tragedy of our day is not only that we do not keep the hour, it is that we have lost the capacity for it, grown so fragmented and so stimulated that even with the time cleared and the door shut, we could not hold ourselves in the room. The lost secret is not only the hour itself, but the ability to be the kind of soul that can stay in one. Let me tell you then what the hour actually is, for it is not complicated, though it is costly. The hour with God is a fixed, defended, unhurried appointment in a real place at a real time, kept whether anything is felt or not, in which a soul reads slowly, prays honestly, waits without hurrying, and stays past the point of comfort. It is the hour Jesus kept, rising up a great while before day and departing into a solitary place to pray, after a day so heavy with ministry that any of us would have slept until noon. It is the hour Daniel kept, kneeling 3 times a day with his windows open toward Jerusalem, and the Scripture adds the phrase that matters most, that he did so as he did aforetime. It was already fixed before the crisis came, which is exactly why a death decree could not bend it. It is the hour David kept, who wrote that evening and morning, and at noon he would pray and cry aloud, who said that in the morning he would direct his prayer unto God and look up, using the word men used for laying wood in order on an altar, for he was describing prayer that had been arranged rather than blurted out. And it is a lost thing. not because God has hidden it, but because a busy generation traded the arranged hour for the scattered moment, and the trade felt reasonable at the time, and nobody noticed what was being given away. Now let me name the first cost of recovering this hour, for there is a price, and the comfortable teachers of this age will not name it. It will cost you your evening. That is the arithmetic nobody mentions, and it is the reason most attempts fail in the second week. A man who intends to rise at 5 cannot be awake at midnight, and the hour before midnight is the one you actually enjoy. The house is finally quiet. Nobody wants anything from you, and there is something to watch. The morning hour is purchased with that hour, and there is no other currency, and every person who has ever kept the one has surrendered the other. It will cost you the fear of wasted time, for you will sit in that room on many mornings, and nothing measurable will happen, and everything in a modern mind will scream that this is inefficient. And it will cost you the shallow peace, for there is a genuine restfulness in never thinking too hard about eternity, and the hour takes it away permanently. And it will cost you the illusion that you are managing your own life, for a man who prays seriously is shown repeatedly how little he ever controlled. These are the costs, and they are why the hour was lost, not because it was hidden, but because a generation unwilling to pay simply let it go until the very knowledge that a Christian could keep one had faded out of ordinary memory. See why this cost is not arbitrary, why God has so ordered things that depth should require so much time. It is not that God charges a fee before he will meet with a soul, it is that certain things cannot be made quickly, and the cost is simply the time they take. A tree does not grow deep roots in an afternoon, however sincere the tree may be. A friendship is not formed in transactions, and the interior life of a man, his steadiness, his discernment, his freedom from the fear of other people, is grown, not installed, and there is no arrangement in the universe by which it may be had faster. The cost does not purchase God's attention. It is the length of time the work takes, and this is why there is no shortcut, no method that bypasses the hours. Because the hours are not a wall standing between you and God, they are the thing itself, the slow, deep work being done in a man while he sits there believing nothing is happening. Now let me take you into the garden, for it is there that the Lord Jesus asked a question about this hour that the church has never adequately answered. He took Peter and James and John a little further in than the others, and he began to be sore amazed and very heavy. And he said, "My soul is exceeding sorrowful unto death. Tarry ye here, and watch." And he went forward a little, and fell on the ground, and prayed. And when he came back, he found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "Simon, sleepest thou? Couldest not thou watch 1 hour? 1 hour." That was the entire request, not a night, not a fast 60 minutes of staying awake while the Son of God went through the worst hour of his earthly life a few yards away. And the 3 men closest to him on earth, who had walked with him 3 years and had sworn that very evening they would die with him, could not do it. And he came back a second time and found them asleep again, and a third time. But notice what Luke, who was a physician and observed things the other writers did not, adds to that account, for it changes everything. He says they were sleeping for sorrow. They were not indifferent. They were not careless men who did not love him. They were emotionally shattered, exhausted by grief, and their bodies simply gave out. And the Lord neither excused them nor condemned them. He said, "The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." And there is the whole matter in one sentence. Your spirit is willing. Something in you genuinely wants what I am describing, and that wanting is real, and it is from God. And your flesh is weak, and it will be weak tomorrow morning when the alarm sounds, and it makes a reasonable case for 40 more minutes, and it will win every single time unless something has been decided in advance and settled before the moment arrives. Bounds pressed this point his whole life and would not soften it. He taught that prayer is a work, a business, a labor that engages the will and not the feelings, and that the great failure of the modern Christian is that he waits until he feels like praying. Nobody feels like it at 5 in the morning. Nobody has ever felt like it. The men who kept the hour did not have better emotions than you. They had a decision that was made once, in daylight, in their right minds, and then defended every morning for 40 years against a body that argued every time. Let me show you next that God himself built this rhythm into the life of his people, so that you will see it is not the invention of unusually intense men. There was a continual burnt offering in Israel, and the instruction was exact. The one lamb offered in the morning, the other at evening, every day, throughout your generations, not on feast days only, not when the nation felt spiritual. And on the golden altar, Aaron was to burn sweet incense every morning when he dressed the lamps, and again at evening when he lit them, and it is called a perpetual incense before the Lord. And the book of the Revelation tells us what that incense signified, that the golden vials full of odors are the prayers of saints. So a fixed morning and a fixed evening were woven into the fabric of the nation, and something ascended at both, whether anybody felt anything or not. And on that altar there was a fire, about which God gave one of the shortest and most demanding commands in all the law. The fire shall ever be burning upon the altar. It shall never go out. Consider what that required in practice. Somebody had to rise in the night. Somebody had to carry wood in the dark and lay it on the coals in every season for generations, so that a flame nobody was watching would still be alive at dawn. And there is the entire picture of a devotional life and the exact way it is lost. The fire does not go out because of one dramatic failure. It goes out because for 11 consecutive nights nobody carried the wood. And the scriptures are full of ordinary men who had somewhere to go and an hour in which to go there. And once you see it, you will find it on nearly every page. Job rose up early in the morning and offered burnt offerings according to the number of all his children, because he said, "It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." And the text adds the sentence that changes the whole picture. Thus did Job continually, not once in a crisis. Year upon year, at dawn, a father laid out a sacrifice for each of his children by name, on the mere possibility that they had sinned somewhere he could not see, and he was doing it long before any disaster came near his house. Abraham, on the morning after Sodom, got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, read that phrase slowly, for the man had a place. It was known to him, he had been there before, and when something enormous happened, he went back to the same ground at the same hour. And Isaac, of whom so little is recorded, has this one habit preserved for us. He went out to meditate in the field at the eventide, and it was in the middle of that hour, with his mind turned toward God as the light went, that he lifted up his eyes and saw the camels coming that carried the wife God had chosen for him. And there is an entire vocabulary of the night in the Psalms that we have lost altogether. "At midnight I will rise to give thanks unto thee," wrote a man in an age without clocks, waking deliberately in the dark for no reason at all except thanksgiving. "I prevented the dawning of the morning and cried," he wrote in the same psalm. And the old word prevented means to go before, to arrive ahead of. He beat the sunrise to the room, and he did it on purpose, and he thought it worth writing down. "When I remember thee upon my bed, and meditate on thee in the night watches," wrote another, describing a man lying awake in the divisions of the dark, with his mind on God rather than on his troubles, which is a discipline in itself, and one almost nobody practices now. Since the moment we are awake at 3 in the morning, we reach for something to look at. And Jeremiah, watching a city burn, gave the instruction in its rawest form. "Arise, cry out in the night. In the beginning of the watches, pour out thine heart like water before the face of the Lord." Pour out thine heart like water. Not a tidy petition, but a vessel turned upside down and emptied in the dark at the beginning of a watch. And Ezra, when he heard of the sin of the people, sat down astonied, the text says, until the evening sacrifice. And then, at the evening sacrifice, he rose up from his heaviness, and fell upon his knees, and spread out his hands unto the Lord his God. Even a man wrecked by grief moved when the hour came round. The appointed time gave a broken man somewhere to put himself, which is one of the quietest mercies of a kept hour, and one you will not appreciate until the week you need it. Now let me speak of why this generation, above all others, has lost the hour, for it is the fragmentation. Your grandparents possessed hours without effort. They had long journeys with nothing in them, work that occupied the hands and left the mind free, evenings with no entertainment, waiting rooms with nothing but a window. The hour was the natural unit of a human life, and it required no defending, because nothing was competing for it. Your day has been broken into fragments by design, not by your weakness of character, but by systems built at enormous expense by very capable people whose specific commercial purpose is to intercept every unfilled minute you own. An hour is no longer something you have. It is something you would have to take back by force from something that is actively holding it. And so a soul that has never once in its adult life held a single hour of undivided attention on anything at all sits down to give one to God, and cannot, and concludes that the fault is a lack of love. And there is a second half to what has happened to you, and it is worse than the fragmentation. You have been trained to expect a return within seconds. The video that does not hold you in the first 3 is skipped. The article that does not reward you in the first paragraph is closed, and your nervous system has learned, across 10,000 repetitions, that any activity which does not produce something quickly is a mistake, and the correct response is to leave. Then you kneel down, and for 11 minutes nothing returns. No feeling, no thought, no sense of anyone there. And every trained instinct in you says exactly what it says about a slow video. This is not working. Go and find something better. And you get up, and you draw a conclusion about your spiritual condition, when what has actually happened is that you applied the reflexes of a consumer to a relationship. Bounds could not have imagined the machinery you are up against, but he named the disease precisely when he said the great want of the church was not better methods, but men who could pray, and that we had learned to substitute activity for the slow, deep work that is only ever done in a room. I want you to understand that what you believe about God will decide whether you ever keep this hour, for a man will not defend an appointment with someone he does not expect to meet. The soul that conceives of God as a distant, undemanding, mildly benevolent idea will never rise at 5 for him, and should not be blamed for it, since nobody rises in the dark for an abstraction. But the soul that has glimpsed the true God, the Holy One, high and lifted up, whose presence filled a house with smoke and laid a prophet on his face, will understand immediately why an hour with such a God is worth the loss of an evening, and will begin to arrange a life around the possibility. The small thoughts of God that fill the modern church are themselves the reason the hour was abandoned. We made him manageable and unalarming in our minds, and nobody keeps a costly appointment with a manageable God. Recover a true and high vision of God, and the hour will begin to defend itself, because you will not be able to stay away. And I must confront the cheap religion of our day directly, for it is the great reason the hour was lost. We have built a Christianity designed to fit into the margins of an already full life, that asks no time, disturbs no schedule, requires no sacrifice of sleep or evening or comfort. And then we have wondered why it produces believers who know a great deal and are changed by almost none of it, but the two go together. A faith assembled entirely out of fragments will produce a fragmented soul, for that is all it can produce. We have wanted depth while paying nothing, wanted to know God while giving him only the exhausted remnants of days already spent on other things. And so the hour was lost, because an hour that is never defended is an hour soon taken. If we would recover it, we must forsake the convenient religion that let us lose it. Let me now show you something from the book of Acts that ought to reorganize the way you think about this. For the pattern is unmistakable once you begin to look for it. Peter and John went up together into the temple at the hour of prayer, being the 9th hour. The hour of prayer, a thing with a name and a fixed time, and 2 apostles of the risen Christ were on their way to keep it when they met a lame man at the gate. Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour, and it was there, in the middle of a kept appointment at midday, that he saw the vision which opened the whole Gentile world to the gospel. He was not seeking a revelation, he was keeping an hour, and God arrived in it. Cornelius, a Roman soldier who was not even a Jew, was praying in his house at the 9th hour of the day when an angel stood before him, and Luke gives us the time twice, deliberately. Zacharias was at the altar of incense at the hour of incense when the angel appeared on the right side of it. Anna departed not from the temple, but served God with fastings and prayers night and day, and was there on the one ordinary afternoon when a poor couple carried in a child with 2 turtle doves. Do you see it? Almost every great turning in the early church came to somebody who was already praying when it happened. God is certainly free to interrupt a man in the middle of his ordinary life, and sometimes he does, but the record shows, again and again, that he comes at the hour a man had already set aside for him. And here is what ought to arrest you. Not one of those people knew that this was the day. Cornelius had prayed at that hour for years, with nothing happening. Peter had been on rooftops before. Anna had been in that temple for decades. They were keeping an ordinary hour on the morning it turned out not to be ordinary, and there was no way whatever to identify it in advance. Which means the entire strategy of the Christian life is simply to be there. You cannot know which hour will be the one, so you keep them all and let God choose. And a church that has largely abandoned the hour should not be surprised that it has largely stopped experiencing the interruptions. And the whole history of the people God has used says the same thing, that the men and women whose lives still burn across the centuries were, almost without exception, men and women of a kept hour. They were not of another order than you. They had your flesh, your tiredness, your capacity for distraction, and most of them had far harder lives with far more physical labor in them. But they rose in the dark and carried the wood decade after decade in rooms nobody entered, and what the world eventually saw of them was only the overflow. Bounds said it in a sentence that has followed the church ever since. The men who have done the most for God have been early on their knees. He did not mean it as a pleasant observation about morning people. He meant that everything visible in a life is produced somewhere invisible, and that the hour is where the actual work of God in a man is done. And let me deal honestly with the objection that has been forming in you since I began, because it deserves an answer and not a rebuke. You are thinking that you do not have an hour, and for a few of you that is genuinely true, and I will not pretend otherwise. A mother with a newborn does not have an hour and should not be told that she does. A man working 2 jobs to keep a roof over his family does not have one in the sense I have been describing. For those souls, the counsel is different, and it is simply that God is not measuring you against a monk. Susanna Wesley bore 19 children in a crowded rectory with no privacy anywhere in the house, and the accounts tell us she would sit in a chair and pull her apron up over her head, and the children knew that when the apron was up, their mother was with God and was not to be disturbed. She found a way that fit the life she actually had, and one of those children shook a nation. But for most of us, the objection is not true, and in our honest moments, we know it is not true. You have the hour, you spent it. Every one of us has watched a stretch of time vanish into a screen and then knelt down at midnight, too tired to form a sentence. And the question was never whether the hour exists in the day, but whether God gets it before everything else has taken its cut. Paul said the thing that settles it, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Redeeming is a commercial word. It means buying back something that has been taken. Your hours have been taken. They can be bought back, and the buying will cost you something you currently enjoy, and there is no version of this in which that is not so. And consider Elijah on Carmel. For the public moment everyone remembers rests entirely on something nobody saw. He stood before a nation and prayed a prayer of perhaps 60 words, and fire fell from heaven. 60 words. And James, writing centuries later, gives us the part the history left out, that Elias was a man subject to like passions as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. He prayed earnestly. Somewhere behind those 60 public words on a mountain lay 3.5 years of private ones, and it is the private ones that gave the public ones their weight. Nobody has ever been given the Carmel moment without the years, and every generation of Christians has wanted the one without the other. And notice what he did immediately afterward. He went up to the top of Carmel, cast himself down upon the earth, and put his face between his knees, and stayed there while a servant went to look toward the sea 7 times. The greatest public display of his life was followed within the hour by the hardest private praying of it. That is the shape of the thing. The hour does not end when the answer comes. And I will not leave the matter in the ancient world, for the man who's teaching this message draws from paid for it in a way that ought to be spoken plainly. Edward McKendry. Bounds trained as a lawyer and was admitted to the bar as a young man before he left the profession to preach. He served as a chaplain in the war between the states, was arrested and held for refusing an oath, and afterward ministered among the wounded and the dying at Franklin in Tennessee, on one of the worst fields of that war. He pastored churches and lost positions along the way, and he was never a celebrated man in his own lifetime. And in his final stretch, living in relative obscurity in Washington, Georgia, he rose at 4 a.m. for 17 years to keep this hour, and wrote about prayer in books that sold almost nothing while he lived. He died largely unknown, and nearly everything he is remembered for was published after he was in the ground. Sit with that, for it is the argument of this whole message. The man whose writing on prayer has shaped more than a century of the church was, by every visible measure of his own generation, a failure who kept an hour in a room nobody entered, and he never saw what those mornings would become. Now let me tell you honestly what the hour feels like from the inside, for nobody tells people this, and the not knowing is the single greatest reason they give it up. The first stretch is almost entirely mental traffic. Your mind will produce a list, it will remember an email, it will rehearse an argument you had on Tuesday, and you will kneel there with your head full of logistics feeling like a fraud, and you will conclude that you are not a spiritual person. Every soul that has ever prayed has passed through this, and the great majority of them left during it. Then somewhere further in, if you stay, the noise thins, not because you conquered it, but because it simply ran out of material. And what surfaces underneath is usually not a revelation, but the plain truth about your own condition. And this is uncomfortable, and it is the second place people leave, for it is far easier to stay busy than to sit quietly with an honest view of yourself. And then sometimes, not on any schedule and not by any technique, something else comes that cannot be manufactured and cannot afterward be described adequately to anyone, a sense of someone. And it is that which the men in this message were going back for, morning after morning, through the long stretches of mornings when it did not come at all. Consider then 2 souls, that you may see plainly what has been lost and what may be recovered. There is the one who believes everything correctly and has never kept the hour, who affirms the doctrines, sings the songs, prays the fragments, and walks through life beside a God who remains an idea, whose faith is wide and thin, who is moved by messages regularly and changed by none of them, and who carries underneath the religion an ache that cannot quite be named, the ache of a soul built for depth and living in the shallows. And there is the one who recovered the hour, who surrendered the evening, defended the morning, sat through the noise and the discomfort and the long stretches when nothing seemed to happen, and who now carries something that other people can feel and nobody can identify, whose words have weight that cannot be traced to a technique, who is not frightened of rooms, who has become, over years, unhurried. The difference between them is not that God gave one an audience and refused the other. God was equally available to both. The difference is that one of them was there. I would not lay all this cost upon you without showing you what is on the other side, for what the hour produces is worth immeasurably more than everything it takes. An hour a day for a single year is more than 9 full working weeks alone with God, and there is nothing else you could do with those weeks that would form you more. It produces depth that fragments cannot produce, because the first stretch of every prayer is the settling, and a man who only ever gives 15 minutes never gets past the settling in his entire life. It produces the death of hurry, which is the great enemy of the soul. It produces discernment, that strange ability to recognize what is not of God without being able to explain how you know. And that is not cleverness, it is familiarity, built the way a sheep comes to know one voice among many by hearing it every day for years. It produces a man who is usable in an emergency, for the short, desperate prayer flies in the crisis only because of all the years of drawing the bow when there was no crisis. And it produces an authority that people feel and cannot name, and which has no source anyone can point to, because the source was a closed door at 5 in the morning across 2 decades. And there is one further consequence that almost nobody considers, and for those of you with a household, it may be the greatest of them all. Nobody in your house will ever know what you pray. They will not hear the words, and you should not tell them. But they will know with absolute certainty that there is a person in that house who gets up in the dark, and children absorb that single fact at a depth no instruction ever reaches. They will not remember your speeches at the dinner table. They will remember a closed door and a light on at 5 in the morning, and 30 years from now, in a crisis you will not live to see, that memory will do something in them that argument never could. So the hour is not a private transaction with no other consequences. It is the most public thing you will ever do, precisely because you will never speak about it. And do not look at this cost and despair as though it were beyond a soul as fragmented and tired as yours, for both the hour and the strength to keep it are the gift of God. The stilling of a scattered mind is not a feat of raw willpower. It is a work the Spirit does in a soul that yields to Him and keeps showing up. The very hunger you feel tonight is already His hand upon you, drawing you, for no man ever generated a longing for God out of his own resources. So you do not stand alone in front of an impossible discipline. You stand in front of a God who is calling you into a room and who supplies the strength the going requires. Bring Him your inability to sit still, your history of failed attempts, your 11 minutes and your wandering mind, and ask Him to do in you what you cannot do in yourself. And know that the men in this message failed at it too. 3 apostles slept through the most important hour in human history, and one of them denied Christ before morning, and that same man preached at Pentecost. Your failed attempts are not evidence about your capacity. They are evidence that you have wanted this for a long time, and the wanting is the only starting material God has ever required. So, I bring you to the question, and a great deal may hang upon your answer. Will you keep the hour? Will you surrender the evening, set the alarm, choose the chair, put the device in another room, and go into it tomorrow whether you feel anything or not? And then go again the next day, and the day after, through the noise and the dryness and the long stretches when nothing seems to be happening, because the hour is available, not cheaply and not conveniently, but truly, on exactly the same terms it has always been available, to the soul that will defend a fixed time and stay in the room. The same God who was sought by Daniel at his window and by David before the dawn, who came to Cornelius at the 9th hour and to Peter on a roof at noon, waits at an hour tomorrow that almost nobody will keep. And the soul that keeps it walks through this loud and fragmented world with a depth this generation has very nearly forgotten was possible. And there was Anna, of a great age, a widow of about 84 years, which departed not from the temple, but served God with fastings and prayers, night and day, 60 years or more of hours, in a building full of people who had somewhere else to be. And then, one ordinary afternoon, a poor couple came in with a baby and 2 turtle doves, and the crowd walked straight past them, and the old woman knew. She spake of him to all them that looked for redemption in Jerusalem, 60 years of hours for a single afternoon. And the reason she recognized what everybody else missed was not that she was cleverer or more gifted than anyone in that temple. It was that the hours had trained her eyes. Let me be practical before I close, for I would not send you away longing for depth without telling you exactly how to begin. Tonight, before you sleep, do 3 things, and do them now rather than tomorrow. Choose the time, an actual clock time, not the vague intention of praying more. Choose the place, a specific chair in a specific room, for the Lord said to enter into thy closet and shut thy door, and there is a room in that instruction and a door and the act of closing it, because the body helps the soul, and the same chair at the same hour builds what feeling never could. And put the device in another room, not face down, not on silent, but physically in another room where retrieving it requires standing up and walking, for it was engineered by experts to win, and you will not out-discipline it, you can only remove it. Then begin at 30 minutes and not at 60, and I mean that in full awareness of the title of this message. If you have never done this, an hour tomorrow will fail, and the failure will confirm everything you already believe about yourself, and you will not try again for 2 years. 30 minutes for 2 weeks, then 45, then the hour. Bounds was not born rising at 4. He built it over years. And decide in advance what you will do inside it, for unstructured time defeats almost everyone. Divide it. Give the first portion to Scripture, read slowly, stopping when something arrests you rather than pressing on to finish a chapter. For 1 verse that undoes you is worth 4 chapters that inform you. Give a portion to thanksgiving and honest confession out loud, in your own voice, telling him the truth about your week rather than producing the approved sentences. Give a portion to intercession with a written list of names, praying them one at a time. And when your own words run out, and they will, and much sooner than you expect, open the book and pray it back to him. Take the Psalms and let David say what you cannot construct. Take Paul's prayers in Ephesians and pray them over your children by name. Then go whether anything happens or not, and expect the first 2 weeks to feel like nothing, because they will. That is not failure, it is the beginning of digging, and nobody strikes water on the first morning. The fire on that altar was tended for centuries by men who were not having experiences, they were carrying wood. And tell one other person that you're doing this and give them permission to ask you about it every week, for the hour dies quietly and alone, always. And it survives when somebody else knows it exists. And when you miss a morning, and you will, and when you miss a week, understand precisely what is happening. The enemy's whole strategy at that point is not to make you sin, but to persuade you that the broken run proves you were never serious. Missing 11 days is not the end of a prayer life. Concluding from those 11 days that you are not a praying man is the end of it. Get up and carry the wood. And guard the hour against good things and not merely against bad ones, for nobody loses the morning to sin. They lose it to an early meeting, a child who needs something, a legitimate task that could not wait, 100 defensible reasons in a row. The men who kept it were not men with fewer demands. They were men who had decided in advance that this particular hour was not available and who said no to reasonable requests for it for 40 years. Now hear the honest word, because I will not promise you what the Scriptures do not. The hour is not a machine, and it does not put God in your debt. You cannot assemble a sequence of early mornings that obligates heaven to give you what you want. Some of you will keep this faithfully for a decade, and the thing you are praying for will not change. And Hebrews says of the greatest company of believers who ever lived, that these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off. And it calls them men of whom the world was not worthy. And the hour is not the point. God is the point. It is entirely possible to become proud of a discipline, to keep an hour the way a man keeps a gym membership, to have a very tidy devotional life and a cold heart. The Pharisees kept the hours immaculately. The hour is a door, and a door is worth nothing at all if you never walk through it. Do not let this be one more message that moves you and changes nothing, for that is precisely how the hour was lost in the first place. You can be stirred by a message about prayer and return entirely unchanged to the same fragmented life, having mistaken a moment of religious feeling for the thing itself, and having forgotten it by Thursday. The stirring is not the hour. It is, at most, a hunger for it. Do not mistake what you feel right now for what I have been describing. Let it drive you tonight to set an alarm and choose a chair so that something exists tomorrow morning that did not exist tonight. But hear the promise too, for it is not vague and it is not conditional on your performance. His compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness, new every morning. There is something waiting at that hour which was not available yesterday and will not be there in the same form tomorrow. And it has been laid out fresh every single morning, including every morning you did not come. So go. Go and recover the hour this generation has lost. Surrender the evening, set the time, choose the chair, carry the device out of the room, and go in tomorrow whether you feel anything or not, and sit through the noise, and stay past the point where you would ordinarily leave. And do not keep it once and lose it again, but build it into the ordinary rhythm of your life, morning after morning, through the dry weeks and the missed days and the years when nothing appears to be happening, until the hour is no longer a discipline you are attempting, but the ground your whole life stands on. Could you not watch with me 1 hour? He asked 3 men that in a garden, and they could not. And he loved them anyway, and died for them the next day, and made the one who failed worst the rock of the early church. So do not carry that question as an accusation. Carry it as an invitation that has stayed open for 2,000 years and is open again tomorrow at whatever hour you choose. The fire is still on the altar. Somebody has to carry the wood. In Jesus' name, go and keep the hour.